Greetings and welcome to the Black Flame Podcast, where history and legends collide, where cryptids, the supernatural, and the paranormal run free.
We are your hosts, Dan and John Leonard, and we are here to bring you stories of haunted places, creepy cryptids, and harrowing legends. So sit back and let us guide you through the world of the unexplained.
Tonight we'll be covering Skinwalkers and Rock Apes.
So stick around to learn more about these two legendary cryptids. The Navajo Native American tribe. Although they are best known for being fierce warriors, the Navajo were a very spiritual tribe. You see, even though they are such a fierce and mighty people, they have an ancient fear that still haunts them to this day. No, they don't fear rival tribes, but rather they fear a creature, one that can shapeshift in the blink of an eye and is out for blood. What they fear is known as a Skinwalker. The Navajo tribe is the second largest Native American population in the U.S., with nearly 300,000 individuals in the 21st century, with most of them living in New Mexico, Arizona, and Utah. But regardless of where they are, they all believe that skinwalkers are something all too real. So what exactly are skinwalkers? Well, they're said to be shape-shifting spirits, or witches, that can take shape of any animal. Not only are they said to shapeshift, but they are also said to possess others as well. These witches wear the skins of animals, and sometimes they wear this animal's skull or antlers, hence the name. Although skinwalkers are largely known throughout the tribe and several other Native American tribes, it is a topic that is not spoken about openly. This is because the Navajo believe that these skinwalkers hide and walk among their own people. It is thought that if you talk about them, they will hear you, and you will become the next victim. It is thought throughout the Navajo that medicine men are the main people that turn into these dark spirits, or those who are the highest ranking in the tribe but only use their power for evil or turn into a skinwalker. But one doesn't just become a skinwalker overnight by a full moon. In order for that person to be transformed into a skinwalker, they must kill a sibling of their own or someone in their family. Once one becomes a skinwalker, that person can change their appearance at will to any animal they want. But the Navajo legends, it's said that most of the skinwalkers seen are in the form of a coyote, a fox, wolf, owl, or even a cow. Not only can they change their appearance, but they can also possess other animals and even people. And it is said that the skinwalker can only possess a person by looking at them directly in the eyes. Legend has it that skinwalkers root around in grave sites to feast on dead bodies. This is how the spirits survive. Not only are they said to eat the dead bodies to survive, but they also use them to make a powder that poisons their victims. So if someone in the tribe falls ill, it is thought that they have been poisoned by a skinwalker. But the Navajo also believe that there is a way to kill them. To do this, you must find out the true identity of them and say their full name out loud. After their name is said, the skinwalker would get sick and perish. The Navajo still to this day have a deep fear of the spirits, but the Navajo aren't the only people who claim to see these creatures. Many reports have come out of Skinwalker Ranch, with eyewitness accounts as seeing a half-man, half-dog-like creatures, wolves 3 times the size of normal wolves, and even some claim to hear voices talking to them in what could only be a Native American language.
I see it early on in your piece. There was a connection that I kind of made between the skinwalkers and even older European werewolf tales, where sometimes what people would see when they claimed that they saw someone turn into a werewolf is there were certain tribes of, the Celts and stuff like that, I think had legends where if you were to don the hide of an animal, that you could allegedly turn into that kind of animal, or like a half person. So people, there was a whole tribe I remember of people that I forget what the name was, but they basically worshipped wolves like a god. And so they would put on these wolf hides and supposedly turn into wolves or wolf like men, which is sort of like what you were talking about with the Skinwalker.
Yeah, they do it with wolves, like I say, wolves, coyotes, foxes, owls even, and cows.
Yeah. But just the way that sometimes, didn't you say in there that they would wear like the...
Yeah, some of them would wear, that's how they got the name, of course, Skinwalker, is because they're known to look like half man, half people, or half man, half animal, wearing an animal skin, and sometimes even the skulls of animals, too.
Gotcha. And they were pretty much always like a medicine man, right? Or like...
That's who they believe that the person most susceptible to turning into a Skinwalker was a medicine man.
And it was pretty much like an active decision to do it, wasn't it? Like, it wasn't like you accidentally turned into one.
So it was kind of like you accidentally turned into one. Like, one doesn't just put on an animal skin and just start walking around. Like I say, the Navajo believed that Skinwalkers were people like you and I walking amongst them, and they didn't know it until someone talked badly about that person or talked badly about the Skinwalker, and then you would see the Skinwalker appear, and some people would get some people got sick and they blamed that on it, just like a lot of witch tales you hear. But it wouldn't just be like a medicine man's going to start dancing around in a wolf skin and he's it.
Right.
It's not like this. No, it's not like that at all.
Yeah. It's always been an interesting story. Just the story of the Skinwalker.
Yeah, it stretches out, so like it goes from New Mexico to Utah.
Yeah.
And that's just with the Navajo. I know other Native American tribes believe in them too. But just the Navajo alone, that's a big stretch of land, from New Mexico to Arizona to Utah. It's a big stretch of land.
Oh, yeah. Which obviously lumped in that land is Skinwalker Ranch.
Yeah.
That, the obvious moniker there.
And that report, that was pretty recent. I want to say it wasn't that long ago. I want to say it was in the 1900s at least. A dude killed a wolf there, and it was, like I said, 3 times the size of a regular wolf. Just crazy, giant wolf.
It's wild.
Yeah. And people say they see, half dog, half people type creatures around there, and heard voices. One guy heard voices, and it was in another language. It wasn't even in English.
That is pretty crazy.
So you have to think it has to be some kind of Native American language.
Right.
Has to be.
That would be the obvious jump,
Yeah, because, the settlers there, they were American, they spoke English.
Yeah.
But that's freaky.
Yeah. It's scary. Especially like they're using the bones out of the graveyard and stuff.
Yeah, they would make, like it said, some kind of powder and almost poison their victims with it.
Ugh. It's creepy.
I just think it's neat how it's kind of like all the same things kind of tie into witch trials and witch tales. Like, people who get sick, it's most likely that a Skinwalker poisoned you.
Right.
With this potion thing that he made,
Yeah.
And that was, the Native Americans had no idea about the Salem witch trials and other witch trials that happened. But it's just weird how witch trials or witch things like that seem to follow out through history. It's almost like it's in our DNA almost.
Yeah. Well, I think it's, when it comes to specifically that, not so much sightings that people have had, but just blaming, somebody for cursing them, essentially.
Yeah.
Or, blaming somebody who's in control of some kind of supernatural power that has something over you. I think it's natural in a way, because when you don't have an explanation for something, especially when you like back in the days of the witch trials,
We're talking about Navajo Native Americans, you
Right.
know?
They, when you don't have an explanation for it, you're looking for one. You want one because it makes you feel like you've got control over the situation once you know what the problem is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So they're trying to
but
put like a...
It's interesting that they always bring it back to something like that.
Right.
You know, it's almost like it's history repeating itself in a way.
Yeah.
Which is interesting to me. Because of course they blame it on, they blame deaths on skinwalkers and, other things like people blame deaths from a wolf man or something, just crazy off the wall stuff. But to tie everything back to witches is interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. And I heard a good quote today, and it was, history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. I was listening to Astonishing Legends.
Yeah, everything's not quite the same.
Yeah, but it's got the same kind of flavor.
Yeah.
And it kind of follows the same template, but it's not.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good way of putting it. But it's interesting how it crosses cultures like that, for one thing.
Yeah.
But as far as the actual story of skinwalkers go, there are people who claim to still see them today. The Navajo, there are certain Navajo people within the Navajo Nation that are still scared of them.
Oh yeah, for sure.
It's very, to them, it's very real, and it who's to say it's not? But it's the fact that people have really claimed to have seen them. I think on Skinwalker Ranch, I feel like I've brought this up on another episode. It was probably either the Beast of Barmston Drain or Beast of Bray Road.
Beast of Bray Road, I think.
Yeah, one of the two. But on Skinwalker Ranch, I'm pretty sure somebody said they saw a half man, half dog, it was just a dog. It looked like a wolf, but on its hind legs, keeping up with their car, flying down the road. So, there are those kinds of sightings.
Yeah. It was funny because I've just finished typing this up, and a night later, I saw on the TV that there was a commercial, and they're doing a thing on History Channel or National Geographic or something about Skinwalker Ranch.
Yeah,
I just typed this up.
Yeah,
and I was like, "What's going on here?"
Well, there's a TV show now for the guy that owns it. He's actually got a crew out there. It's been going on for a while, I think, for a year maybe. I just heard something about it the other night when I was listening to another podcast. But yeah, and skinwalkers aren't the only thing that's supposed to be seen out there either. I mean, they've got UFO activity, Bigfoot and
ghosts,
poltergeist. Yeah, all kinds of crap. Where the land itself seems to just be a magnet for everything supernatural. But obviously got its name because of skinwalkers.
Yeah.
That's not really a coincidence. I think it's in Utah.
It is, yeah.
Yeah. So that's well within the Navajo range there.
Yeah, I don't think it's quite in the Navajo. Just because it's in Utah doesn't mean it's in Navajo territory.
Not what it is now, no.
No, it's not. It's not now. But it's still, like I say, other Native American tribes believe in skinwalkers. That's not just a Navajo thing.
There's also another one, too, that I think may be either a different version of the skinwalker in other Native American legends. The Wendigo. Do you ever hear about the Wendigo?
No.
Something I forgot. I should have looked it up when I knew that you were doing skinwalkers. But it's something similar, if I remember right, where it's some kind of either person that turns into an animal or half animal or whatever, or some kind of just animal spirit creature that's supposed to come after you. But I think that's Algonquin too. I think that's more like your East Coast Native American legends, if I remember right. But
there's also one, and it's not talked about in here, and I don't know if the Navajo believe it or not. I haven't looked into it that much, but the Thunderbird. You ever heard of the Thunderbird?
Oh, yeah.
That's another Native American legend, apparently. It's supposed to be some kind of giant bird, and I think it's a condor. It's some kind of eagle or something.
Well, it's. I mean, what it is to them is just a giant ass bird.
I mean, it is.
But people claim to see them. But because of how big they claim they claim they have like wingspans of like 20 feet and stuff.
Yeah, that's what the Native Americans would talk about.
Which you have like your California condors, which are...
I think they're the biggest bird in the U.S.
I think that's right. And, I mean, don't get me wrong, they're huge. They have like wingspans of like 6 feet or something. They are humongous birds.
Yeah.
And
no doubt there's a couple outliers that are freakishly big. There has to be. Especially back then, during Native American times when no one else was around. I'm sure they saw bigger birds, but nothing 20-foot wingspan.
I mean, they could have. There's actually some interesting stuff they found in New Zealand where, like, the people that lived there always had these stories of these giant birds that would come down and grab people and, like, take them away.
Like the Thunderbird.
Yeah, well, it turns out that's true. They found fossils of these birds that were humongous that definitely could just, like, grab somebody and take them. And now they know it's legit. It's not just a legend. Like and they coexisted with humans. We know that. So it's interesting.
That's and I think it's in Venezuela, I want to say. The harpy eagles, you ever heard of those?
Yeah.
They pick up goats and drop them off cliffs.
Yeah.
If it's big enough to pick up a goat, it can pick up a teenager.
Yeah. And I mean, that's why I'm saying I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility.
Yeah, no.
Just because we haven't found any, they might be extinct. Because that's what the people in New Zealand did. They went and killed off those birds. Because they were just wrecking people.
Dragon-sized birds flying around.
Yeah.
Pterodactyls.
Like
swooping in on people.
I'd go egg smashing, I guess.
Yeah. But, no, the Skinwalkers, I've always heard about them since I was a kid, but I never really looked into them. It's definitely an interesting one, though.
Yeah. One that... I don't know why, but just anything that's tied to like the Native American legend, I think has its own specific flavor, and it's just interesting to me.
Yeah,
but yeah, no, and this one's like falls right into the category of terrifying if true.
Yeah, apparently it's said, from Navajo legend. It's said that the Skinwalker will kill like its siblings, or that's another way someone becomes one. Is if someone uses their power gets really high ranked up in the Navajo system and uses that power for evil, that person is said to more likely become one of a Skinwalker. Or if you kill a sibling, you're almost doomed to that. But it doesn't say anything about if they're alive, or I assume it's kind of like a vampire thing from what it sounds like to me.
Yeah.
That your spirit almost takes back over after you die, I assume. I assume, that's just my, like, you don't just kill someone and you start walking around wearing animal skins killing people.
Right.
I think it's more, what they think of is more along the lines of vampire kind of. Like the Strigoi of Romania, where people would die and then people claim to see them running around after they've been buried and stuff like that, and people get sick and all that same kind of deal, pretty much.
Huh. Another rhyme in history.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. This has been Skinwalkers. Stick around to learn more about Rock Apes.
When it comes to American military history, few wars bring up as much controversy and division as the Vietnam War. Citizens back home were conflicted on many topics involving the American inclusion into the dispute. Rightfully so, stories about the battles and horrid living conditions have been covered endlessly in documentaries and books, but one aspect of the war seems to have been all but ignored by the general public, possibly because it doesn't seem as significant as the lives that were on the line at the time, and I don't think anyone could find a fault in that line of thinking. But now that the war is long past, and at least the physical wounds have all healed, I think it's time we pull out one more line of stories that may still cause a lot of controversy, just with much lower stakes. That line of stories being those of soldiers who claim to see and essentially live alongside large, upright primates known as rock apes. When you exclude the fact that it was the backdrop of one of the world's most vicious wars, Vietnam is actually a very beautiful country. Its coasts are filled with sandy beaches and scenic rock formations, while the interior is mostly mountainous and covered in dense forest. And as we know, anything as dense and vast as the Vietnamese jungle provides the perfect cover for undiscovered species. The majority of the time, these creatures go on uninterrupted by human civilization until we begin encroaching into their territory. Sometimes what we find are fairly innocuous creatures such as new species of frogs or small mammals, but if the stories are true, what the American soldiers ran into in Vietnam would be far more significant. For years, the native Vietnamese people have supposedly lived alongside what they call Batututs, or Ngoa Zong, which are both names for forest people or wild men. They are reportedly anywhere from 3 to 7 feet tall, with reddish, black, or brown hair covering everything but their knees, hands, feet, and face. They also tend to have long arms, protruding bellies, and walk on 2 feet. These creatures mostly went unheard of in the Western world until American troops began their insurgence into Vietnamese territories. It was around this time when the term Rock Ape came into being, and in our first reported encounter, I think you'll agree they earned that name honestly. One report from an American soldier stated that one night he and his men were sitting around a campfire when they noticed a small creature making its way out of the jungle towards their camp. It seemed to be unafraid of them and almost completely oblivious to their presence, as it got close enough for one of the men to poke it with the tip of their rifle. The creature seemed startled and threw its arms up, screaming, before running back into the forest. Shortly after, they heard large boulders rolling down the ravine towards their encampment. They were supposedly around 300 to 400-pound rocks that were rolled down by the larger rock apes. Luckily, no one in the camp was hurt by the rocks, but they had another problem to deal with after the assault. It's said that later, a large troop of these apes came running down the ravine towards the soldiers and they were forced to fire. The soldier relaying this story said that when it was all said and done, there were 17 dead rock apes strewn about, and the smallest one was not among them. He also noted the large, fang-like teeth they gnashed on their way into battle. While this seemed to be a violent, attempted assault on humans by the creatures, most stories tend to be just sightings and accidental run-ins that resulted in the animal just sauntering away back into obscurity. One such account comes from another soldier who said he and his men were sitting on the edge of the jungle when they began to hear movement coming towards them. Assuming the worst, they had their guns at the ready, but what came out of the woods not far from where they stood was a 5 to 6 foot tall bipedal ape with orange hair, a deep prominent brow, broad shoulders, and a muscular build. When one of the men went to shoot, another warned him against it, saying he'd had encounters with them before, and as long as you don't attack or scare them, they just go away. He said the creature looked at the men for about 10 seconds before turning around and walking back in the direction it came from, never to be seen again. Clearly, it wasn't entirely uncommon to run into these creatures out there, and the soldiers recognized they could be a serious threat. Another, and possibly my favorite account, comes from a man whose father was telling him stories about the war and casually mentioned seeing a group of orangutans. He said that one day they were in the jungle and a large troop of 60 to 80 of these creatures began passing through their general area. He estimated at about 200 feet away. He said they made a lot of noise as they made their way through the trees. His platoon officer told the men to stay quiet and wait until they passed through, because he knew these creatures were very territorial and would attack if provoked. Supposedly they ranged in size, with the larger ones looking about 5 feet tall with thick muscular arms, weighing probably around 100 pounds. Eventually they all passed without incident and the soldiers went on their way. Now this sounds like a marvel to witness on its own, but what is truly interesting is that there are no orangutans in Vietnam. They are only found in very small numbers in Indonesia and Malaysia. After his son realized this, he began doing some research to see if his father was just misidentifying some other species of monkey that is native to Vietnam. He created a document with hundreds of pictures of different species of monkeys and apes from around the world, in different positions, angles, and even included different sexes of the animals. He had his father run through the document and pick out what most closely resembled what he saw in the jungle. What he got in return were all of the orangutan pictures. Upon looking at all the different species of monkeys and apes in Vietnam, you'll find that none of them really resemble an orangutan. The closest one to them is probably the gibbon, but I would argue that the two are pretty hard to mix up when you compare them side by side. It turns out that there was a subspecies of orangutan that used to inhabit the area, but they supposedly went extinct thousands of years ago. So what could this man have seen? Luckily, we don't just have anecdotal evidence to go off of. In 1970, a biologist named Dr. John McKinnon made some intriguing finds in the form of odd human-like footprints in the jungles of Vietnam. It said that they resembled those found by Eric Shipton on his excursions to the Himalayas. They look close to human but have a large toe protruding to one side in a way that would be impossible for a human to make without breaking their big toe. Unfortunately, those turned out to be misidentified bear footprints that had been eroded in the snow by wind and sunlight, but the ones found by Dr. John McKinnon were fresh and in the soft soil of the Vietnamese jungle. Having already discovered other large unknown mammals in the very same jungles, Dr. McKinnon believes it is entirely possible that there is an undiscovered species of large apes waiting to be found and documented by the scientific community. With the broad range in size and even locomotion, with some claiming that it walks on all fours and swings through the trees, while others say they are only seen walking on land, it's very possible what we're looking at are actually multiple unknown species out there that are being lumped into one category. As it stands today, we still don't know exactly what the people of Vietnam and the American soldiers were seeing. Many theories have been thrown about in an attempt to explain the sightings. Some say they're simple misidentifications of known animals. Others say they could be a leftover of Neanderthals or Homo erectus. No one knows for sure, but one thing is certain. People are seeing something strange out there, and unless we do more research, the mystery of the rock ape could continue to be just that, a mystery. So what do you think about that?
I couldn't help but laugh.
Why?
It just sounds funny. First of all, the rock apes. And the first story you talk about, when the one comes walking out of the jungle around the soldiers, and they get close enough to where he can poke it, and he just like, ah! He just like freaks out and screaming and running away.
The way that...
And then, like, rocks and boulders start flying down the hill. Like, it just sounds funny to me.
It was the way that the guy had to like actually described it was that it was like kind of dark out, and then it looked like a medicine ball was rolling towards them from the from the jungle, and then as it got real close to one of them, they poked it, and it was like ah, like freaked out. Maybe I think about a R2D2, the R2D2 scream, you know, as it like flops off into the jungle.
I was
like,
picturing it like its arms flailing in the air, just like running away and screaming.
Like a little tiny monkey looking.
I just can't get that thought out of my head. And then like it pissed him off, and like these giant boulders come flying down the hill.
Well, then they said the big ones came down after it, though. Now,
how did they get any of the bodies that they killed 17 of them?
I don't know. I couldn't find any pictures. I couldn't find. You would think, man,
one of them would have to snag something from one of those animals.
Yes and no, because if you think about it, like, I thought about this from a couple different angles, and, like, if you're an American back in the 70s, and you get shipped off to Vietnam, you're just an average person who lives here, you have no idea what's in the jungles there. They just assumed it was some kind of known animal that was around there.
That's true.
And so, like, they probably just thought, God damn, these big-ass monkeys were around here and had to kill them. I thought they were going to kill us. So they may have just thought it was something else. You know, like in that one guy's story with the orangutans, he thought they were orangutans. He said it's exactly where that's the closest thing that looked like it to them. And his platoon officer, that's what he called them. He was like, yeah, those orangutans. He had never actually heard the term rock ape. So he was over there in Vietnam and saw these things and didn't even know they were called rock apes.
I think it's some kind of orangutan gibbon hybrid.
I don't even know if that's possible, though.
What do you mean? No, it's possible.
Like, you can't just mate anything with anything else. They have to have enough genetic...
Yeah, and why couldn't it happen there?
Because I don't know if they have enough...
Like, I'm saying maybe they're left over from, like... And how do we know when the last orangutan died there? You know?
Yeah, I mean...
Sure. Sure, I'm sure there's a few that were hiding around that people didn't know about.
Maybe, but I mean, like they say, they find the fossils there, but the researchers have never actually found a live specimen of one, which doesn't mean they're not there.
Yeah.
But I would think, because it's a different subspecies, it wouldn't be the same orangutan that we have nowadays.
Yeah.
So it could be a leftover that just hadn't gone extinct. But what's weird are the differences in, like I say, the locomotion. Some people say that describe more like a Bigfoot type creature.
But they say it also walks on all fours.
Well, they say it could, and that's where this guy's, the man that saw the big platoon of them, they were swinging through the trees.
That's like a gibbon.
Right.
Orangutans, they kind of swing through the trees, but not with any force behind it. They're kind of like lazily. I'm sure they can if they get pissed off. They can, but instantly when I thought swinging through the trees, I think of gibbons.
Well, the other issue with it being an orangutan too, if they were seen in that large numbers, orangutans are. I looked it up. They're more solitary. The only time that you really see an orangutan around another one is usually when they're mating or if it's a young one with a mother. And they aren't particularly aggressive either. They don't get, unless it's another, they're
very territorial. I do know that.
Against other orangutans. They say they're really not, they're pretty docile with people.
Now, could that also have to do with the area? Because you know how some species of animal come from, like sharks, different species of sharks, like in South Africa. Yep. That's where the only place that you'll find sharks, great white sharks, jumping out of the water to hunt. Now, are those ones more aggressive, or they just have different hunting patterns? Like in California, you've never seen a great white shark jump out of the water there. They just don't do it. You know, they go in more shallow water than they do those deep waters off the Cape of Good Hope. I want to say.
Yeah, I think that's
South
right.
Africa.
Yeah,
it's same with all animals. You know, they're different, same species, but different. They act differently depending on where they are. Could that be the same with, or why wouldn't it be the same with orangutans? Being that just because they're docile here in Indonesia and Sumatra or wherever, doesn't mean they're wild things in Vietnam.
Well, that's the problem though. Is the first thing you have to prove is that there are orangutans in Vietnam.
That's what I'm saying. I think it's some kind of hybrid.
And that's I don't know if we'd have to look it up, but I don't think a hybrid is possible between a gibbon and an orangutan. They have to have enough genetic material in common.
Yeah.
To make a hybrid.
Yeah.
You know, like you can't.
But just because we haven't found one doesn't mean they're not there. And I know you can't just put them together and they make it. I know that.
Well, I mean, that if it's possible, that is how it happens.
Yeah.
And
I'm saying, what if it is? We just don't know.
It could be. That would be just as interesting as anything else, really.
Yeah.
Because I think if all the accounts are true, they have to be seeing more than one thing. And it doesn't mean that it's not all misidentification. But I think there's a lot of evidence that points towards there being some kind of unknown species of ape out there. They say it didn't have tails, which is also another problem with...
gibbons have tails.
Right.
No, they don't. They don't have tails.
No, they're apes.
Yeah, they don't have tails.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. Huh. Mm-hmm. They don't have tails. They're the one... That video, the one walking across the bridge... Whoa. Walking across the bridge that I showed you?
Yeah.
He was going like that. That was a gibbon.
Yeah. But I don't think that, like, and the guy that was looking at those pictures, too, though, his son had thrown in pictures of gibbons, because that's what he thought it was, too, that his dad was really seeing. And he was like, no, he was very adamant. Like they looked like that, and he was pointing towards the orangutans.
They're a lot bigger and buffer.
Yeah,
you know? Like a chimp.
Yeah,
they're just buff.
But, and they have those protruding bellies too sometimes. That like they were talking about.
Yeah,
got like the beer gut. You know.
Yeah, and you don't see. Chimps don't have really a beer gut.
No. Well, I guess some of them probably do.
Some of them do.
But if you've ever seen
orangutans,
even the baby ones, yeah,
they stand up and they've got fat little bellies.
Yeah,
yeah. I think it's some kind of orangutan.
I think it very well could be, but I still don't think it fits all of the accounts. That's the problem. That's what bugs me, is that they it's not so much like the Sasquatch sightings in America, where they all pretty much fit the same bill.
Yeah,
but there seems to be like a Sasquatch sort of thing out here, or in Vietnam, and something else that's swinging through the trees and looks more, like a lesser ape and not something closer to humans. And like I say, it could all be misidentification, but I think that what's intriguing too is that you have all these people that were soldiers telling these stories, and the locals too. And they say they would attack the Viet Cong as well. It wasn't just the American soldiers. It wasn't just the American soldiers that had problems with it. Like they were all
funny.
Like
I just think that there's such a problem that people have to look out for them. I just think that's funny.
It was almost like you had two different enemies out there.
Yeah, these things are such a problem. They're just a nuisance.
Yeah. Well, there were, I didn't actually read any firsthand accounts of it, but there were mentions of in the research, they would find people ripped to shreds, and they think that that's what did it. Scary.
It's hard telling a jungle,
and they say that another reason why they call them rock apes, is because they throw rocks, which is also another Bigfoot,
That's a monkey thing too. Monkeys throw a lot of stuff too.
Yeah, but they said that they would throw rocks at them, and they would throw the rocks back at the people. You know what I mean? Like the soldiers would see them and toss things at them, and they would throw them back. They said even some of them would throw grenades into them, and they would throw them back at people. That's scary.
That thing's funny, man. Can't get it. This one just makes me laugh.
But I think it's interesting.
It is, but it just makes me laugh. All the accounts are just funny to me. It's like a cartoon.
It is, but
funny.
I don't know.
Grenades back at him.
It's pretty wild. I think it's an interesting little pocket of stuff that's sort of related to Bigfoot that isn't really talked about that much. You don't really hear stories about the rock apes, Yeah. Like you do Bigfoot and Yeti and skunk ape, all your other big name supposedly undiscovered hominids.
I think it's because it's so widespread. Over the U.S., how many states have reported sightings of Bigfoot?
Yeah, every single one of them just about.
Vietnam, rock apes, that's it.
Yeah.
No one else talks about rock apes.
Yeah. The Batututs.
What?
Batututs. That's what the Vietnamese call them. That and I really had to look up how to say the other term.
The first one sounds like a Ace Ventura thing.
Yeah, Batututs and the Ngoa Zong, and it's spelled Ngui space Rung, but it's pronounced very differently. I had to do some practice with that one. But yeah, for years they'd been seeing them, well before the American soldiers were ever a part of the landscape, I guess. But that's what I think is so interesting about it, is that the American soldiers going over there, not knowing really what they're going to run into, and them hearing a few stories about these things and just being like, oh yeah, there's those things. It would be like if first time you ever went to Hawaii and they were like, yeah, we have sea turtles, and you're like, oh cool, oh there's a sea turtle, and it's just a part of the landscape. It wasn't anything unknown until we started doing research and realized holy shit, these people are seeing something that doesn't really line up with anything that still lives there. And
yeah, I just think it's funny how mad they get.
I would be too. Get all this, and that's the thing too, is that if the Vietnam War had never happened, then we might not ever really have all these, might not even be as popular as they are now, which isn't very popular at all, but would be even less popular. And I think there was one species, that Dr. McKinnon, who found some footprints there, or somebody who told him about footprints. He had discovered this odd, some kind of antelope that lives in the jungle that the natives were saying had been there forever, and nobody had ever found it. And they were like, it's another story, whatever. He went in and actually found the thing, and it's really weird looking.
That's what I was saying earlier. There has to be some, there very well could be some kind of orangutan that we haven't found there. I mean, it's a jungle. It is dense, and it's a jungle.
Yeah.
It's just,
And I think that is, even if it was just a leftover of that, supposedly extinct subspecies of orangutan, that opens up the door of possibility if that turns out to be true, even if that's it, which is, I think, one of the more mundane explanations, honestly, out of what it could be. It's still super interesting, and the implications of that being, okay, here's an ape that supposedly went extinct thousands of years ago, but in reality it didn't, which could very well be the case for like Gigantopithecus and Bigfoot. You know what I mean? It opens up that door like, okay, here's another one. We found it. We thought it was extinct, but it's still here. Same thing with like the coelacanth, which I know that's in the ocean, and that's a lot more, even harder to find than a monkey in a jungle.
And animals live longer in the ocean anyway, normally.
Yeah, but if that turns out to be true, and they're still seeing these things, so it's still an ongoing thing, the implications of it are just fascinating to me. I think that would be one more notch of like, okay, maybe Bigfoot is real.
Maybe you can't,
and not just specifically Bigfoot. Like,
yeah, I was gonna say you can't really just say, okay, maybe Bigfoot is real because these things are real.
Well, no, I'm not saying that, but like it makes the possibility of Bigfoot's existence more enticing. I think it kind of lends some bit of like, okay, maybe I'll put a little bit more stock in the idea that something that supposedly went extinct is still around.
It I don't know. It just makes the
argument more plausible, I guess.
It gets me because there has to be like you say, there are droves of them in like 80 of these rock apes.
And like that story.
That's way more than you hear of Bigfoot.
Oh, yeah.
So like, why isn't science looking more into these things? If there's that many of them, they have to be a thing.
Yeah.
They have to be an animal.
I would think so.
You see, stories of Bigfoot, people are like, oh yeah, I saw one or maybe two of them, maybe a family of them at most. 80 of them? Someone has to go look for them things.
That's what I'm saying. And I think...
They gotta be real. Like, they gotta be some kind of monkey.
It has to be. Unless the guy really did, that was years ago.
They could be telling war stories.
And maybe he actually did see gibbons. He was pretty far away. It's very possible that he saw something that was completely known. But
you're in the middle of a hostile environment. Your mind's not in the right place at all. You're probably seeing stuff that might not quite be right. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but to the same token, he was in an area where you do find gibbons, and he never went out of his way to say that he had seen a bunch of gibbons and was like, no, it wasn't one of those. But for him to specifically say these were orangutans and that's what they looked like, is pretty specific. Like I say, if you look up an orangutan and a gibbon, it's a pretty big difference. For one thing, in size.
Oh, yeah.
And he described how thick and muscular their arms were. They appeared to be like bigger than his own, is what he said.
Yeah, like an orangutan.
And like, yeah, and that's something that is definitely not a gibbon. Gibbons they're not tiny by, and
they're long and slender.
Yeah. And they have their arms are
like
longer than the rest of their body. Just like
they're funny looking
knuckle draggers.
But they're like the best. As soon as you said swinging through the trees, I was like, it's got to be a gibbon, because those things are meant to swing. If you ever watch a video of one, it's kind of entertaining to watch one. It looks like it's just like a Muppet coked up, just flying through the trees. It's kind of funny to watch.
Yeah. That makes some weird noises too.
Yeah.
But no, that one, like I say, I think that's the most fascinating story that I came across, and I came across that on Reddit. It's this guy who was just like, okay, I think it was actually in the Bigfoot subreddit that I'm a part of, and he was like very adamant, and his father was very adamant about the fact that like it looked like an orangutan.
Oh, this has been a funny one.
I think it's interesting.
It is. It just sounds funny. Like the stories just crack me up. Like I just can't get over like the thought, like it was run through my head as you were talking about the first story when they poked it with a with the gun barrel and it just like screamed and ran away, and then a bunch of big boulders start falling down and a bunch of giant ones start bum rushing you. Like, it's just funny.
Yeah, I bet it's funny to listen to, but if you were there...
Oh, I know.
Oh, my
funny
God.
And they throw grenades back. It's just funny.
For one thing, when that thing screamed and took off, I'd be like, oh my God, we're screwed. Because you'd think like the Viet Cong are going to know where they are now. You know?
Unless they're deep into enemy territory.
That would have been my first thought. Is like, oh crap, that he just gave up our location. But then to see these things running in there and supposedly killed a bunch of them. 17 of them.
Yeah.
Like, it's a lot of bodies, man.
Yeah, the other thing is how tall, like 3 to 7 feet. It's a big variance.
And that's the other interesting part, too, is it seems like...
Orangutans don't get 7 feet. I think the tallest they get is like 5 feet, and that's a big one.
Yeah, it's about 5 feet. And they, you know, they can walk on their hind legs, but they tend to kind of lope around on all fours for the most part.
Yeah.
And the accounts that you find of the taller ones, up around 7 feet, sound more like they describe a human-looking like creature covered with fur, not something that... Now they say that the arms still appear longer than a human's would if they were that size, but it seems like it's made for upright walking. Not like if you look at an orangutan when it's on its hind legs, it looks like it shouldn't even be standing like that because their legs look way too small for their body.
That's all monkeys, just about.
Yeah.
Like gorillas.
Yeah.
It looks like the legs got hit with a shrink ray.
Yeah.
Got like 2-foot legs and 5-foot long arms. Scratch kneecaps without bending over.
But they don't... I don't know. It seems very plausible that there's something out there that we haven't documented yet.
Yeah.
And I think it's super possible.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely is. It's the jungles of Vietnam. You know.
Thick and deep. And
they're always finding new species of bugs and snakes, spiders, animals, all kinds of animals in jungles.
And even it's one thing when you find something that's small like a bug or something like that, but the fact that they've already found an unknown species of antelope in there, that's like not a small creature by any means when you compare it to like a frog.
That's like Forrest Galante. We ought to get that guy to go after him.
Yeah.
That guy could find him.
I bet he knows about him.
But he went, I don't remember where he went exactly, somewhere in the jungle. Found some kind of crocodile that, was it in India? Maybe in India. He found some kind of crocodile that thought was extinct, and they're not.
He's discovered a couple new species, or not new species, but rediscovered. That's kind of what he does. Is
his grandfather found the coelacanth, right?
Is he the one that did it?
I think it was his grandfather was the one who discovered the coelacanth.
That's interesting. That would explain why he does what he does.
Pretty sure.
Because that's for anybody who doesn't know. Forrest Galante, I'm pretty sure he has a show on Animal Planet.
He did,
and he's got a great Instagram too.
Good guy, seems like.
Yeah, but he goes out and looks for supposedly extinct animals and tries to rediscover them.
He finds a lot of them.
Yeah, he's kind of obsessed with thylacine too.
Those things have got to be still around.
Yeah.
They have to be.
There's a couple videos that are pretty convincing.
I mean, the last one that was seen alive was just in like the 30s.
Yeah, I mean we have video footage of it. It's black and white, but we have video footage of them.
They have to be around.
I think so.
Especially back in the woods of Tasmania and places like that. Have to be.
I would think so.
But yeah, that guy, Forrest Galante. If you listen to this, go look for rock apes.
Please. For thousands of years, across almost every continent in the world, people have claimed to witness human-like apes or wild men living in the wilderness. Perhaps what they're seeing are just projections of our inner sense, telling us that we ourselves should be more in tune with nature. Or maybe, just maybe, there really are unknown creatures left in the uninhabited corners of the world just waiting to be discovered by modern science. If you ask me, that certainly seems to be the case with the Vietnamese rock apes. This concludes tonight's episode of the Black Flame Podcast. Check us out on Facebook and Instagram at the Black Flame Podcast.
Be sure to come back next week for a new episode. And remember, stay spooky.